The vibration hit my palm like a jolt of electricity, sharp, urgent, merciless. 2 minutes. That was all the warning they gave me. 2 minutes to gather the fragments of myself I'd been sweeping into quiet corners for years. 2 minutes to walk into the room that had once existed only in my daydreams, the room that stood like a gleaming monument to everything I had clawed toward in the dark. My pulse thundered against my ribs, a frantic warning drum echoing through the narrowing corridor ahead. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead in a sterile monotone, but beneath their glow I felt the ghosts of every dismissal, every closed door, every moment I pretended not to notice when my worth was measured in silence instead of opportunity. Still, I moved forward. My hand trembled as it reached for the door, though my face betrayed nothing. I had been preparing for this moment for years, yet a cold, metallic unease braided itself through the air. Something was wrong in a way the body senses long before the mind dares to name it. The air tasted like a warning, like static before a storm, like betrayal waiting just out of sight. But backing down had never saved me. It had only taught others how easily I could be pushed aside. So I inhaled once, slow and painful, and pushed the door open. The hinge groaned like it, too, resented my arrival. And the instant I crossed the threshold, feeling eyes lift, jaws tighten, silence twist into something predatory, I knew this wasn't the meeting I had envisioned. And it certainly wasn't the opportunity they had promised. I had walked into something else entirely. Something calculated. Something waiting for me. The room swallowed me whole the moment I stepped inside. Heavy curtains muted the sunlight, leaving only thin spears of light slicing across the polished table. Their eyes followed me, assessing, dissecting, already knowing far more than I did. I could feel the judgment coiled beneath their stillness, coiled like a snake waiting for the warmth of hesitation before striking. My chair creaked as I sat, its sound unnervingly loud in the tension-stricken silence. I folded my hands in my lap, willing the tremor in my fingers to still. The faces around me were familiar: directors, senior managers, people who rarely descended into the trenches with the rest of us. People who knew how to smile while hiding a dagger behind polite questions. "Thank you for coming on such short notice," one of them said, though his tone was devoid of gratitude. It felt more like an accusation, thinly veiled. Another leaned forward. "Before we begin, we need to clarify a few things about your recent project." The phrasing struck me like a blow. Clarify. Not evaluate. Not discuss. Clarify. I kept my expression composed, though inside, my chest tightened. Of course. But the questions that followed weren't about strategy or performance. They were surgical strikes, aimed at old scars, not current work. They wanted to know why I made certain decisions months ago, why I didn't anticipate issues that weren't mine to foresee, why I trusted approvals that came from them. Each question felt like a blade peeling back layers of self-protection I had spent years constructing. Memories rose like bruises beneath my ribs, late nights no one noticed, milestones others claimed, promotions dangled like bait and then withdrawn before I could touch them. Yet beneath the squeezing ache of fear, something else flickered, a fragile ember of defiance. A voice whispering, "Not this time." As they spoke, I noticed patterns in their cadence, in the way their gazes flicked toward one another before each question. Their smiles were too tight. Their phrasing too precise. The entire meeting felt choreographed, like a performance I wasn't told I would be starring in. Then one of them, someone whose neutrality had always felt suspicious, slid a folder across the table. My name sprawled across the front in thick black ink, as though I were already a case file, not a colleague. "We need you to review this," he said. His voice was calm. Too calm. My heart stumbled. Because the room wasn't just tense. It was expectant. Waiting. And when I touched the folder, I felt the truth humming beneath the surface, cold, deliberate, dangerous. Inside it waited something I never expected to confront. And something they never expected me to fight. The folder opened with a soft crack, like a confession fracturing under its own weight. Pages slid beneath my fingertips, pages I didn't recognize, twisted into a narrative I had never lived. Dates rearranged. Emails cropped. Timelines distorted with surgical precision. Each document painted a version of me I had spent my entire career fighting not to be. A liability. A burden. A convenient name to place atop a pile of sins I didn't commit. My breath hitched, but the panic tightening in my throat quickly sharpened into something steadier, rage, slow and controlled. Not the kind that lashes out, but the kind that studies every angle before striking with purpose. "This is incorrect," I said, each word measured. They didn't even look surprised. Instead, they feigned concern, as though they weren't the ones who curated this collection of half-truths and outright lies. They circled me with questions disguised as opportunities to clarify, each one a trap lined with silk. But then I began to see it. Inconsistencies. Contradictions. Mistakes they didn't think I would catch. A missing timestamp here. A mismatched approval chain there. Details subtle enough to slip under the radar, but not mine. Not today. Not when everything in me screamed that this was bigger than me, bigger than my reputation, bigger than whatever performance they expected me to give. I leveled my gaze at the man sitting to my left, a man who hadn't spoken since the meeting began but whose knee bounced beneath the table, betraying him. "Why does this timeline omit the compliance checkpoint you personally approved?" I asked. His knee stilled. His eyes flickered. And in that instant, the room shifted. Their facade cracked not fully, but enough to reveal the fear pulsing beneath their carefully curated calm. I had found the first thread. And as I pulled, I could feel it unraveling. But I wasn't prepared for what or who that unraveling would expose next. I steadied myself, feeling the heat of humiliation turning into something sharper, something clean. The betrayal that had been simmering at the surface finally coalesced into clarity. They had built this trap meticulously, but they had underestimated the years I spent surviving on the margins of their recognition, memorizing every detail because I had no luxury of mistakes. "I'd like to walk through this," I said, lifting one of the forged timelines. A few exchanged wary glances, as though I had deviated from the script they expected me to follow. Their silence gave me room, and the room didn't realize that silence was all I ever needed. I traced each event with my fingertip. This approval here? It never came from me. I forwarded the request to the department lead that same morning. "That's not what the record shows," one of them snapped. But I was already steps ahead of him. "Because the record you're looking at has been altered. You removed the second email in the chain." I turned the page. "This discrepancy? The missing compliance note? It was your responsibility, not mine." A muscle in his jaw twitched. Another spoke, voice stiff. "Are you suggesting we fabricated evidence?" "You're suggesting it for me," I replied quietly. The man who had avoided my gaze since the beginning finally lifted his eyes. They were frantic, darting, cornered. His fingers trembled around the pen he pretended to take notes with. "Do you want to explain?" I said gently, "why the server logs show your login accessing my project folder after midnight the week before submission?" His pen clattered onto the table. A hush fell over the room, heavy, suffocating, expectant. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," he murmured. The others stiffened. One whispered his name in warning, but it was too late. His composure, so meticulously crafted, crumbled like fragile plaster. "It wasn't my fault," he said, voice cracking. The deadline shifted. The scope changed. I couldn't keep up. "If the failure was traced back to me." "So you traced it to me," I finished. His silence was the confirmation they all feared. But they still thought I had nothing concrete. They thought I had only suspicion. What they didn't know was that I carried proof, not out of paranoia, but out of survival. Screenshots. Email chains. Backups of backups. Receipts they believed I was too naive to preserve. I placed my evidence on the table like a quiet storm. Their faces drained of color. I had them. I had all of them. I opened my mouth to deliver the final blow, the truth that would unravel their entire scheme, when the door burst open with a force that silenced every breath in the room. And someone unexpected stepped inside. Someone with power. Someone who could either save me or destroy everything. The room shifted as the newcomer entered, an executive whose authority cast a shadow long enough to swallow every excuse, every lie, every trembling denial scattered across the table. The conspirators straightened, panic tightening their posture. Even the air felt different, as though it recognized the weight of the moment. "I heard there was a concern that needed my attention," the executive said, voice low and controlled. Every eye darted toward me, some pleading, some hostile, all desperate. The executive nodded toward me. Let's start with you. For the first time in my career, I didn't shrink. I didn't apologize for the space I occupied or soften my words to make others comfortable. I spoke with the clarity forged by every injustice I had swallowed, every accolade stolen, every door closed in my face. I laid out the entire timeline. The buried approvals. The fabricated evidence. The midnight tampering. The orchestrated character assassination dressed as a performance review. Silence swallowed my final word. When the executive turned to them, the tension snapped like a brittle wire. Is any part of her account incorrect? Their denials collided into a chaotic mess of excuses, but none aligned. None held. None survived the next question. Why? The executive asked slowly, did your version of events require altering documented records? They froze. Because answering that would condemn them. The collapse was inevitable. A chain reaction of guilt unraveling under the weight of truth. Within minutes, orders were issued. Internal audits launched. Access revoked. Suspensions delivered with the force of a long-awaited reckoning. I felt the shift inside me, a slow uncoiling of years of self-doubt, a release of the weight I'd been carrying since the first day I learned that talent didn't protect me from sabotage. Justice didn't come in a blaze. It came in the quiet acknowledgement that I had been right to fight. But just as I exhaled, believing the storm had finally passed, the executive turned back to me. Their expression was unreadable, something between assessment and possibility. There's one more thing, they said softly. Before I finalize these decisions, I want to offer you an opportunity. One that may change the trajectory of your entire career. My heart stilled mid-beat. Because this, I had not expected. And whatever came next would determine everything. If this story reached a part of you that remembers every closed door, every quiet injustice, every moment you refused to break, then stay with me. There are more stories waiting to be told, and I would be honored to share them with you.